Hello, hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome back to another episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. I'm Lee Elias, and I'm joined by the sensational Christy Casciano Burns and the marvelous Mike Benelli. And you know what, guys? When it comes to youth hockey, there's no shortage of topics. But at the end of the day, we are all tasked as coaches and parents with the development of a hockey person and player. For that reason, we brought on someone who is and has been extremely ingrained in hockey development. He won an NCAA championship as a player before coaching at that level, which then led him to become a mainstay with several U.S. development and national teams. After 10 plus years as the technical director of USA Hockey's American Development Model, we'll refer to that as the ADM throughout the show. He was named as the Senior Director of Player and Coach Development in 2022, where he is now in charge of providing a framework for associations nationwide to follow for optimal athlete development. In short, if your kid plays hockey, this man is involved. He has been involved with USA Hockey for over 25 years. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ken Martel to the show today. Ken, welcome to Our Kids Play Hockey.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you, buddy. This is a cool episode for us. We pulled our audience for questions. We have questions, so we're going to have a great probably hour here today. There's so many questions, but like I said, we only have the hour. We said in the open, you've been involved with USA Hockey for over 25 years.
Yeah.
That makes me think, man, the game looked very different in 1999, or as the kids say, the late 1900s, compared to today.
Yes.
So many of us view hockey through a micro lens, right? We see it just as it was today. As someone who has seen the macro, how much has the ADM advanced the game, and how much have you seen the game change in your time?
Well, the game certainly evolved. You know, if you watch an NHL game, for example, side by side from back in the 90s, like it just looks different. The game is faster. And I think the biggest thing is the players are much more interchangeable now than they ever were. So, you know, that leads to just different types of play, different skill sets, different abilities that the players need to have in order to be successful. So, yeah, changed a lot.
Changed a lot. Some people are still resistant to change, and we can't understand why, because ADM has a lot of research and statistics and facts now, because it's been around long enough where you can actually see the difference it's made. Maybe you can just share some of that with our viewers. For anyone listening right now who's still on the fence about it, which you should not be.
Yeah, well,
it's proven to work.
Well, certainly our numbers have gone up. We've had really good growth. We've had great retention. Our retention numbers, you know, players that are in that 14U age category, if you played hockey last year, 96% of those players come back the next year, which is a fantastic stat that differentiates us from a lot of youth sports. So, you know, one, that player retention, and two, again, like I said, the technical ability of our players is as high as it's ever been. You know, we still have a ways to go in things that we think the country needs to work on, the development of our hockey sense, hockey IQ, those things. And we're actually working on new research right now that will, we think, help in that regard. But for us, it's, you know, our players, they have an ability now to make something from nothing. If you look at our national teams, their creativity is better. Their spontaneity is better. We've always had some really good players, don't get me wrong, but the breadth and the depth of our player pool is much, much larger. If you look at statistically, for example, over the last 15 years, our percentage of players that are in the National Hockey League has gone up by almost 10%. So we've taken market share from other countries. Canada has gone over that same amount of time. They've gone from about 53% to around 40%. We've gone up about 90%. And, you know, our Swedish colleagues and Finnish colleagues have eked up a little bit. But again, that's just proof that something's changed here. Something is going on that's different, and doing it well, because players at the highest level, we have more of them than ever before.
So Ken, we had the opportunity to put a little poll out on Facebook just to get a little read on, what kind of questions can we ask to our USA hockey guru that we're having on. And I think one of the big things that kept coming up was this misconception about what the ADM is. It's the American Development Model. We know that. I've been involved with this for a long time, watching, 8U cross ice hockey be fought. And then, people have just come around and understood that it's just the right thing to do. But when you talk about percentages of players, and again, I know our goal isn't to turn every 8-year-old into an NHL hockey player, but the statistics are showing us that the longer term success of a player, and a player having more skill and the player having more success for longer periods of time, stem from the change in what the American Development Model was intended to be. And maybe you could talk a little bit about how we grabbed that knowledge from Finland and Sweden and the smaller countries that would have been so successful in doing this with such smaller number of population, per hockey player.
Yeah, well, we originally started this, and as you mentioned, with our national teams and some of the players at the highest end, that's kind of where the impetus started. It was the NHL actually liked what we were doing with our national team program, and they said, well, we'd like to invest more in USA Hockey, come up with a plan that would help development. So USA Hockey and the NHL have two long-term goals. It's one, to have more American kids play the sport, and the other is to have more American kids play the sport really well. So they came back to us and said, what could we do differently that we might be able to invest in? And so we spent a year looking around and talking to not just within our own sport, but we talked to other sports under our Olympic umbrella, talked to other performance directors, looked at what was going on in kids sports around the world. And then lucky for us, we have good relationships, as you mentioned, with Finland and Sweden and some of the other countries, and to see what it was that they were doing with their kids and where did they differentiate from us, because we have lots of kids with very little kind of getting through to the high end. They had small numbers of kids with a much, much larger percentage turning out to be really, really good. So you're saying, oh, well, what's the difference? And one of the first things is you notice, and again, not just our sport, but from a youth sport development perspective, every sport was modifying what their adult version was to fit the kids, not trying to modify the kids to fit the adult version.
Right.
If you think in essence, the way to have more players turn out to be really good, it's as many as possible for as long as possible in the best environment possible.
Right.
Like that's the secret kind of sauce.
Yeah. And your research is showing
So
the retention is much better. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Based off of that understanding, right, that we're trying to do the right thing for the longest period of time to create the best results. I think one of the things that I always had to fight, and I go to Norway, I do a hockey school in Norway every year, and they want to copy us. Like they're trying to find ways that like you've actually made it where, okay, we've taken this good hybrid over here, and now we've kind of turned it around because we're adding that North American flavor to the game. And it really has expanded what everybody in the world is doing as far as development. But I think one of the misnomers, too, is that the ADM and the way it was initiated was so that more recreational kids could just have fun. And I look at it, and I think one of the things early on, I don't think it's a problem now, but early on, it was never deemed to be a high performance model. Like it was never looked at as, no, this is the way to high performance outside of what we've been doing traditionally. Yes, some kids have gotten through the system. They're lucky and they're great athletes. They made it through the system, but maybe talk a little bit about the fact that the American Development Model is the model for high performance, not just for participation.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And again, it started from looking at what we were doing with our national team program, and then kind of backing down, the system a little bit. I kind of look at it as, we'd spent now over 20, I mean, we're 26, 27 years with our NTDP. And, it's sort of like the Ford Motor Company having a race division. And when you figure out things that make the car go a little faster, you go, well, hey, we're a little more efficient. Well, could we put that back into the production models, right? So we've learned things about working with kids and teenagers. And we said, all right, well, how do we kind of back down the system a little bit and figure out what works well at every age to kind of create the right environments for kids to thrive. So it is a high performance model, and that's where it got its impetus from. But you brought up the word fun and fun and recreation. Well, fun is supposed to be what every kid has when they play the sport. I'm sure that you've probably, Christy and Mike, looked at some of the research that came out, Fun Maps and Amanda Visick, and some of her seminal work around this across all sports, hockey included. And fun is the number one reason. What goes into being fun for kids? And it's actually what they think is fun is a little bit different than what adults sometimes think. So, putting this in their world is really important. So not just the recreational player having fun, but the most precocious players, they're not having fun, then they'll walk away from the sport too. So fun's a key element of what youth sports is supposed to be.
Ken, I had a really interesting conversation with a parent recently about his kid having fun. And the parent came up to me and he had said, well, he's not having fun and I don't know if this is working out. And I asked that parent, well, did you ask that kid, your kid, if he's having fun? He goes, well, no, I just know. And I said, well, your kid's always smiling out there. He's always smiling at me. I think you should have that conversation. And, they did. And it's like the kid was having a great time. The perception from the parent was that the kid wasn't having fun. So I think that that's something that we all, coaches, parents, and everybody in between, have to check ourselves too. Ken, I want to bring up another funny point too, is that I mentioned at the start of the show how sometimes we only see 6 inches in front of our face instead of 6 miles. And I remember when the ADM was introduced, and I always tell people, look at, from a high level, look at how many World Junior Championships the USA had won prior to the ADM versus after, and then look at the amount of American players that have come out of the USA, obviously at high levels, but also the development side of it is pretty intuitive. And there's a lot of people, to the audience listening, a lot of people working on this. And as Mike alluded to, we asked the question of the audience, and there seems to be a lot of confusion about how to implement the ADM. Some people were saying, well, we're mandated that we have to use the ADM, which has not been my experience. And then there's other people that say that, like, well, the ADM is based off of this and that. And it was just massive confusion. So my question to you, and this is really to appease a lot of the audience, is what is the flexibility, of the ADM and youth development? And then if there's a coach that's creative and wants to maybe work on their own drills, how does that play into it, right? To the coaches listening, right? How do they execute the ADM in a way that's the best possible for their teams?
So you bring up a great question here, because it's not a one size fits all kind of model. It's supposed to be very adaptable. As a matter of fact, we want our coaches to be creative. No group of kids, we usually talk, when I get around coaches, sometimes say, hey, any of you school teachers? And the ones that say, yeah, you're like, well, are any of your classes ever exactly the same? And every school teacher is like, well, no. Well, you have to teach to the group that's in front of you. So things that are going to work, that are going to, with one group, aren't going to work with another. And this is where coaches need to be able to, look at the group in front of them and tailor what they do to fit those needs, right? So we want our coaches to be creative. The ADM is not a set of drills. It's a set of principles that we know if you're following those principles, your methods can be a little different, but you're going to have success. So 5 things. We basically run through this in our coaching program, right? We want practice to be fun, because we know that to engage players, if they're having fun, they're more engaged and that's going to promote learning. We want practice to look like the game, right? If we want transfer from practice to the real game, the closer practice can resemble elements of the real game, the better the transfer is going to be. Historically, we've decontextualized our practices too far to where we lose that high quality transfer. We want lots of puck touches, which just means lots of repetition at whatever it is we're trying to work on. We know that that's important for learning. We want a bit of challenge, because again, the right challenge point for our players keeps them engaged, not too difficult where they shut down, and certainly not too easy where they're bored, right? The right challenge point helps that engagement and learning to happen. And then we want this to be something that they're engaged with over the long haul. So if we keep with those elements, we know practice is probably pretty good. Oh, and the last piece was constant decision making, right? If we're not making if the players aren't making decisions in practice, they're not going to learn to make decisions in the game. So,
and I love that list.
Those
it's
are the
a great
elements.
list, of what you want to see from coaches, what you want to see from the kids. What would you like to see from parents?
Well, some patience from parents, right? Look, it's a difficult sport, right? I mean, we're not like other sports where if you show up at soccer, you can already run. So for us, we have to learn to navigate on that little piece of steel. We're manipulating an object with at the end of a stick. It's difficult. Learning and development are slow processes, and they're kind of messy, right? It especially through, for example, our teenage years, where kids hit those adolescent growth spurts, things are changing. There's all kinds of stories out there where players that ended up at the highest level of sport, they weren't very good at certain points of their hockey career, but be patient, stick with it, support your kids, be encouraging. They're supposed to be their kid's biggest fan and be a good cheerleader. But let the coaches coach, let the club work with the kids. They're the ones that have a little bit more of the expertise, and just be patient. That's what we want.
I want to add on to this because I coach at almost every level, and it's funny at the mite, the mite level, the square level, or the 6-year-old level, the 8-year-old level, the 10-year-old level. The conversations I have to have about, hey, you got to let the turkey cook a little bit, right? Yeah. It's not going to be done overnight. And some of these kids, the talent is so amazing at 8 years old. But I always refer back, not every kid walks at exactly 12 months. Not every kid talks at exactly 12 months. The development, and then you're in a team environment where you're going to have differentiating skill levels. And what's cool when you coach at multiple age groups, you really can start to see the development over the course of 5, 6, 7 years. And it takes time. And it's easy sometimes if you've played the game, or even if you've watched the game for 20, 30 years, to have that, well, this is what you do in that situation. Well, if you're not on the ice and you're not 7 years old, you're not seeing that the same way that you're seeing it as an adult. And it takes time. The key word you said, Ken, is patience, right? Like when I work with mite teams, and based this heavily off of the ADM, right? I try and talk with coaches about, look, we don't have to have 55 outcomes this season. The outcome can be, I want everyone to be a proficient skater. And if your kids are proficient skaters with some other skill sets, obviously, like you've done a great job, right? If they can skate well and they have some puck handling ability and they can shoot the puck at mite, that's a great job. And then there's the handoff, right? To squirt, which is, okay, now we're going to advance a bit more. But I tell parents this all the time. I'm still working on shot mechanics at squirt heavily, skating heavily, right? The skating teaching really doesn't ever stop. So I again, maybe I'm getting a little bit on the soapbox here too, but my point is like that patience is key. Every hockey player is going to develop, There's also a mental side to this, right? When you get to the squirt level, the maturity of a 10-year-old is all over the map. I've got some that are insanely focused and ready to work, and I've got some that are tonguing their mouth guard while I'm talking and looking at the sky and wondering what they're going to be doing after the game. And that's completely normal, right? It's completely normal and okay. I mean, obviously you have to manage expectations as a coach of the players, and you can treat some of that mental side of the game too. But Ken, again, I wanted to dive into this as well. Okay, so again, I think we've addressed some of this confusion. We're definitely going to make that a mini clip. For those of you who ask those questions, you can take that mini clip to your organizations. This man is the top. This man is the person that is the authority on that, and he clearly answered your question. But Ken, what I want to know from you now are what are the top issues facing hockey development in your eyes, and then what can we do in our communities to work on that?
I think one of the issues we have right now is we've gotten tied up around the word skill development, and I think there's a little bit of a miscue on what skill actually is. Skill is execution within the game context, and the difficulty we're having right now is we have people that are working on technical ability, and we tend to break things down into too small a component where, yes, you ask every coach, do you have players that you go, they skate pretty well, handle the puck really well, can't play? And every coach is going, well, I got those players, right? Well, what's missing? And it's the relationship back to the game, being able to use those technical abilities in a real game context. So for us, the development of hockey sense, of hockey IQ, comes from changing a little bit on how we set up what we do in our trainings. Again, it goes back to that looks like the game a little bit more. Right. Doesn't mean we can't isolate on a technique if a player can't do it, but we tend to over error in our system on a lot of drills that don't require any decisions by others, or they're just focused on the physical movements of the players, not on the interaction with the players in the play. So for us, it's trying to communicate that with a lot of coaches that they don't coach full time. It's not their full-time gig, and they kind of have this in their mind that maybe rote learning, doing something very basic over and over and over again will help them be better in the game. And it's not quite how it works. So we've developed a lot of players in our country right now we think that are the good hockey school practice player or the good practice player. But how do we help them be better within the game context? So that's sort of where we're headed with a lot of things at the moment to try and advance our sport. As I said, the game's not getting slower, and the players aren't getting any less interchangeable at the highest level, which demands, our more versatility in our players. So how do we help them do that? I don't know if that answered the question, but that's kind of the thought process.
It answers the question.
Where we're going, what we're trying to do to help players be better long term.
So I think maybe we'll take this opportunity to give the audience then, some free advice on how you, as a professional, I know you're a cerebral person, you've studied this to nauseum, you're probably at a disadvantage because you're seeing everything, right? And a guy like me who actually doesn't like block drills, I don't like edge boss drill. I don't love them. Like I'd much rather just play. I'd much rather say. So what can we do as coaches and youth hockey developers and people that are in the game to show that, like, I'll have an argument every week that my bantam, my 12U coach or my 14U coach would rather have 2 full ice practices a week than 5 quarter ice practices a week. And I think because of the way our game is, we don't understand, and maybe because there's boards, right? And maybe because we're in this glass, that maybe we just don't understand that the utilization of ice is what the American development model has done for us and opened our eyes that I can take 12 kids from the blue line in and work on hockey and not use my quote unquote full ice to do block drills that don't look like the game. So I think what happens is, like, a person like me says, oh crap, I only have 2 hours a week. So I have to build in those block drills because there's no other way to even see if the skill could develop, right? So maybe talk a little bit about what can the parents go back and say, wow, if I'm looking for a program, I'd much rather look for a program that has a lot of chaos in it, that doesn't look organized. It is, right? But maybe talk a little bit about how that's so important, because our kids in hockey, they don't play outside. They don't use free time for hockey.
Yeah.
They don't like all the things we had as kids. These kids, and it's our fault, but these kids don't have those opportunities. So as coaches, we're trying to build this into our curriculum, but maybe talk about how a youth hockey program in our country right now can better utilize that ice to get all the things they need to get in with limited ice time.
Yeah, well, time under tension. I mean, you look at development, same amount of money, same amount of resource. If you can add add another team into the mix, maybe you get a third practice every week versus just 2. The more ice time you get within that time frame, the better you're going to be in the long run. Especially as kids develop. We already talked about soccer. The kids can already run. Well, time on ice is important for us. So utilizing that resource effectively can actually give our kids another chance to skate every week, right? So there's that angle of it. And then from a development standpoint, the best cone is another player in reality. Like, if you look at a lot of the research, the timing, it's like a batter hitting off of a pitching machine versus a real pitcher. The actual swing timing is different. The actual interaction and timing between a player going around a cone and a player maybe, stick handling by an opponent is actually different. Because I have to worry about their stick. I have to worry about, the timing of these things is different. So we're actually learning the wrong thing sometimes in those isolated environments where we have to relearn it against an opponent. So it doesn't have to be, complete, a game every time, but certainly having live action in our practice is important, right? They're going to get reps at something that looks a little bit more like the game. Is what we're trying to strive for.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And we can use the ice effectively.
Yeah.
Well, I teach motor development at the graduate level, and these are some really basic rules about trying to develop players that we seem to have missed somewhere along the way. So yeah, that's the point. It's, can we find more ways to get more kids an opportunity to practice, to be in the right situations that will over the long haul. And well, one other point, and I think this is a big one. Like, I started at USA Hockey with our national team program, and for a while I was our player personnel director as well. So I'd go around to a lot of youth rinks looking at what happens in practice, because I was watching players. And 15 years ago, you would go to a rink, and it would rarely be that you saw some type of small area game in practice. Now, it's hard to go to a rink, especially with our better clubs, the ones that are actually producing high-end players, and not see those games or live action play be a significant part of their training. And I think that's been one of the things that's taken hold, that's allowed players to be better. That needs to be, parents need to understand that. This is a tool that allows players to grow and develop.
Can I just add one thing to that? Because it just happened to me yesterday, Christy, right? So I sent a text message to a couple of colleagues of mine watching a private coach doing a private lesson with 3 kids from this organization that I work with. And he had the kids, they never left the circle in the corner of the ice they were in. And this is the same 3 families that complain every week about the multiple team skill development sessions that we run. And I said, your kids never left this 10-foot radius area for an entire hour that you just paid $290 for 3 kids. I said, so I think, Ken, to your point, we're seeing that shift. Why? Because I think the people that are becoming coaches and getting into the game, the leaders of the best organizations that are producing players, are seeing, well, number one, it's producing better players. Number two, I'm probably saving some money, or I'm stretching my dollar because I can get more kids on the ice. And more importantly, you said it earlier, it is a hell of a lot more fun for coaches and players. Like, you just get to watch like just competition and kids beating each other up in the corner and fighting for pucks and fighting for position. You get to see that the entire time. And I think that's a benefit to all of us.
Yeah, I made
Yeah,
the
you're
same
100%
kinds of
right.
observations. Yeah, 100% right. I'm glad you raised that point, Mike, because I saw the same thing with my kids too. Just those fierce small battles, and they were having a ball. One thing I'm concerned about, Ken, we've talked about this in my column with USA Hockey Magazine. You're always a regular feature in there because you give such great guidance. The early specialization is getting worse now, not better, with parents having FOMO, fear of missing out. And I don't know why this trend keeps going in this direction where parents feel like, cut off all the other sports. My kid is destined to be a hockey star. I'm cracking that secret code by early specialization. Please share some great advice for parents who are trying to follow in the footsteps of what we've seen as total failure.
Yeah. Well, just look at our NHL players. In 2019, the National Hockey League and the National Hockey League Players Association did an internal study of their membership. So the NHL, the 700 and whatever players that played in the NHL that year. And that's including players like Connor McDavid at the time and Austin Matthews and some of the stars of our game right now. And the players self-reported 98%, over 98% were multi-sport athletes through at least 14, and over 80% were multi-sport athletes through at least 16. So that has to say something, right? Those are the players that are at the highest level. This is just a one-off, but Mike, you brought up a colleague's son here recently in our previous conversation before we jumped online, and Victor Mancini, who's playing with the New York Rangers. He's a 22-year-old rookie in the lineup, and he was a multi-sport athlete. Took summers off, didn't play summer hockey, when he was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years of age. Did some once a week with his buddies at sort of the Bantam level. And then when it was got time to get serious and kind of kick it in, started in with it. But it followed the ADM right along the whole way. And he's in the NHL, and a lot of players that were better at those younger ages because they raced out and, let's face it, if you play all summer long and you play all year long, you're probably going to maybe be, you show up at tryouts and, you're not rusty. Okay. But in January and February, when the season gets long, those players, they just don't seem to have the emotional energy that it takes to put into the game. I mean, we've had a 26, 27-year experiment going on with our national team program, and the majority of those players are multi-sport athletes that make our national team. Okay. I don't know how else to say it, like the ones that are getting through to the top are the ones that aren't pushing it so early.
Every bit of research shows that if you are serious about athletics, you need to be a multi-sport athlete, also a multifaceted person, right?
Right.
We always
Yes.
talk on here, Ken, that it goes beyond sports. You can play an instrument, you
Right.
can be on the debate team, you can sing, you can write. There's a lot of different ways
That's
to
right.
do more than just one thing. And
Well,
again, you can see it. But I'll just say real quick, you can
Yeah.
see it in the kids who play multiple sports. You can see them borrowing from other sports into the game of hockey and they develop. I've seen it with my own kids. Also, too, I think part of the problem is that parents will say to me, well, he or she wants to play spring league. He or she wants to play summer league. And look, I get it. All right. I wanted to play all the time as a kid too, but we do not let our kids play in the spring right now. All right. And it's a parental decision that you need a break. We need a break, right? If you want to play another sport, that's fine. And I can tell you the benefits from that. And by the way, Ken, it was Mike and Christy that convinced me completely to make that decision. The benefits of that over the last 3 seasons have far outweighed if they just played through. All right. Now, again, everybody listening, you parent your kids however you feel like you need to parent your kids. There's no perfect parents. I'm not saying you have to do it that way, but I'm saying that you you need a break. You need a break from the game from time to time. It's important to play other sports and have other interests. And if you're not encouraging your kid to do that, you really are putting them in danger of having a false identity as only being a hockey player. And I'm telling you from a psychological standpoint, as someone who works in that realm for mental fitness and team building, you do not want your child to only identify as a hockey player. All the pro athletes I know are not just hockey players. They have other interests as well. They are people. And it's very tough at a young age to not see beyond that if you don't allow them to do that. Mike, I'll throw it to you. I'm getting on a soapbox again. I'm sorry. I'm passionate about it.
Well, I was going to say to Ken's point,
Okay.
I'm like, the funniest thing is hockey actually benefits from the multi-sport athlete more than any other sport.
Right.
Like,
So
if you're in ballet or if you're in tennis or if you're in
Gymnastics.
soccer or gymnastics, like you focus. A soccer player is not getting better at soccer by trying to play hockey and killing himself. Like, or if you're in ballet or if you're, but hockey is the one sport that benefits because this putting blades on is so foreign to the human body that you can't do. I got a chance to work with this guy, Reg Grant, who was working with the New York Rangers as an agility and movement specialist, right? And the same type of thing, like all the stuff that you need to do to create brain speed and muscle memory and muscle speed has to happen off the ice. It actually is a detriment to try to build it on the ice.
Well, and Mike, real quick, okay, you'll laugh at this too. Look, my son's a goaltender. I've had multiple parents come up to me this year and say, wow, his glove hand has really improved. You must have been working on that. I said, no, I put him in baseball. That's why his glove hand is so much better. We played a different sport. It translated. Like again, that's a simple answer, but so many skill sets. One of the ones I love, Mike, Christy, Ken, is like for passing reception, throw a football because you have to anticipate where the ball is going to land. That teaches you how to catch a pass on the ice. So many kids miss that, but you go outside and have a toss and explain it that way or play that game. You have transferred a skill. The other funny part, and Ken, I'm going to throw this to you for your thoughts too, is that as a hockey person, I've said this before the show, I had to remind myself when my kids were playing other sports of, look, they're not here to be better at hockey. They're here to play baseball or softball, right? It's my brain that's making the transfer to hockey. They might want to play baseball over hockey one day. I got to be careful as a parent that I'm not saying you're only here playing baseball to get better at hockey, right? So, Ken, I'll throw it to you. We talked a lot. Mike,
Wait,
I love
I
those
gotta
examples.
put 2
Christy.
cents in.
Christy's
I gotta
gotta
put
speak
2
for it.
cents in for yoga. Okay.
Oh, I like
Flexibility, breathing, mental control.
100%. But if you want to be better at
my
yoga,
friend.
you don't go to power skating class. Like, I think it's just you concentrate on yoga. But I think
Right.
Ken has been, Ken was a part of the whole study, when USA Hockey was going through this transition. And I loved it because you got to get all this great education for free. Like, you got to say, oh, I just go to the website and I get it for free. Like, this is great. I don't have to do any research. And I think Ken, talk about like like when you saw this firsthand about our athletes not being able to do a tumble salt or a cartwheel or doing like great hockey players that had a ceiling, right? Because you couldn't teach those little extra things that they need to do. Where I had just conversation with Maddie Herr this past week about the fact that when he was in baseball season, and transitioned to hockey, he was like the best tip-in guy there was in the world because his hand-eye coordination was on point. Like he was in the game. And I think we take that away when we say, oh, I'm just going to do, 18 hours of private lessons every morning. I think it's just, knowing, talk about that the ability to the transferable skills, not just to be a better hockey player, but how much healthier it is for the human body.
I think, you've all said it. It's there's things you can take from other sports that you can use within ice hockey. But I think the biggest thing, and you've mentioned the well-roundedness, the players that we see that are multi-sport athletes, they just tend to be more adaptable. And whether that's adaptable in their growth as players on the ice, and whether their motor skills and physical abilities, or in their adaptability to new situations that come along. Like adversity is nobody makes it to the NHL or makes it to the high level without facing some type of adversity. And having some adaptability, and those are just skills that you can pick up in other areas. And I go back to just having enough mental energy and focus to continue to get good. When you come to the rink, if you're focused and have really good energy, you're probably going to get more out of what you do at the ice rink. And the ones that come year round, like, let's face it, you get maybe a little bored, even the ones that are totally into it. So, I use the analogies of my kids when they were growing up. If we'd have pizza for every meal, they'd love it, but they probably need a few other things along the way.
You could put vegetables on pizza, Ken. What are you talking about, man?
Yeah. So
I'm teasing.
Yeah, no, but kids will do what they want to do. But I think there's some parenting in there too. Is help them have a break. It will actually help them in the long run.
Big time.
Keep them wanting a little bit more.
Ken, it's funny you bring this up because I agree with you 100%. And I don't think this is limited to just kids, because we're at the time of the year we're recording this. A lot of coaches are coming up to me and saying, I had to do my CEP last night. It took forever, and I have to go through my level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 courses right now. And they kind of give the eye roll, which I think is just a little cliche at this point. And I think what you're saying about the kids actually applies to the coaches. If you go to your coaching course with the right attitude, and you go to a coaching course maybe excited to learn something, even if you don't think you will, first off, they go by faster. Second off, you almost do learn something. You can have great conversations in these CEP courses with other coaches, which is why they do those breakout rooms, which I really appreciate. But it's all about how you step up to the table here in terms of going to those courses. So I wanted to ask you about the general coaching education process.
Yeah.
Not just the level 1 through 5. I think that that's a given, but there's so much continued education. Especially, I don't think a lot of younger coaches understand this too. USA Hockey has really gone in on doing beyond the CEP courses with goaltending courses and other things. Can you talk to us about the development of developing a coach, and why this process is so important for everybody to take, even if you don't think there's going to be any value in it?
Well, if we want our players to be lifelong learners and continue to improve, I think as coaches, we kind of want to model that a little bit ourselves. And like Mike and others, we've been around the game for a long time, but the game keeps changing. It's evolving. I learn new stuff every time I'm with another group of coaches. The interactions, like coaching is an experiential business craft, so to speak. You get good at it by doing it. And the more you can be around other coaches, discuss things with other coaches, get exposed to new ideas, maybe we can steepen the learning curve so you don't have to go through, years and years and years of that experience to get better at what it is that we want to do with the kids.
Right.
We're always learning.
Yep.
I
think that's where, when you're in this game and you're coaching, you get offended by people that don't respect really what coaching is. I mean, I heard you speak at the coaches site, right? So here's Ken Martel. He's probably he's one of the highest level people in USA hockey. He's speaking at the coaches site. And then somebody would say, well, you mean he's actually sitting in all the other speeches? Like he's sitting in the room, listening to everybody else and taking notes and writing down, say, oh, wow, that was pretty good. Like, so, and then when you look around the room, right, and you say, oh my God, like, okay, every Division I coach is there. Every 10U coach is there. I think that's where it gets offending to a person like me, where, just yesterday, I just talked to a coach and said, oh, I took your level 4 6 years ago. Thank God I got that over with, because now I don't have to take any more. I don't have to take any more courses. And I jokingly watched them, after I watched them coach, I'm like, well, it shows that you've done no other future, education, because you haven't invested in yourself. And in turn, as our friend Dave Starman will say, you haven't invested in your kids, right? So if you're not investing in yourself and you're not learning and you're not an active learner in the game or in sport or in physiology of how all this works, then you're really not invested in working and helping with the kids. You might be invested in winning hockey games, and that's great. And you might be invested in winning a couple of championships. Great. But you're really not invested in helping the kids, because like you just said, the quote of the day, right, is you have to be a lifelong learner. You have to always be in the room saying, what can I learn from this person? I mean, that's what I've always taken from listening to you. Say, okay, well, Ken's done all the research. Why don't I just listen to him? Or do I have to go out and, read 16 books and go to Finland and go to Sweden and go to Russia and go to Canada? Like, I can go to the person who's actually done all that work for me and then listen to what he has to say, and then kind of take what I need with the age group and the kids that I'm working with. So I think that's like, so when we see that the comment on Facebook, right, about, well, oh my God, the coaching education is so arduous for all of us. I'm like, well, have you seen football? Have you seen other sports? Like, our coaching the coaching education program in USA Hockey is basically the gold standard. I mean, you're actually learning how to coach not only ice hockey, but you're learning how to teach people. And I think that's what one of the great things about where this has evolved is the communication of coach to player outside of how do you take a slap shot.
Yeah, no, we've spent a lot of time on trying to think about the how to coach skills, not the what to coach. I mean, we all have our cell phones. We can open up and Google whatever drill you want. You're going to get a million of them. So it's not necessarily the what, it's the how, and that's how you help kids. How do you communicate with them? I mean, it's different, right? We already talked about brain development and where they're at and how they learn, and they're prior to the age of 12, they're not learning from previous experience, for example, the same way we are as adults. There's all these things that have to go into how do you meet the kids where they're at. So we're trying, but we don't have all the answers. I mean, we're doing research right now in a number of different areas, whether it's looking at biobanding and the physical maturation of our kids through those teenage years. We're looking at awareness and improving awareness on the rink. We've got again a couple universities and people that are working with us to study those things along with the National Hockey League. So we don't have all the answers, but we're trying to figure some things out, and then we can come back and share what we learned. And you brought up breakout sessions in those coaching sessions that we have in the coaching clinics, and geez, we learn from each other. There's some really good youth coaches out there that get a chance. You get in a little room and you ask a question and you share some ideas, and we learn from each other too. So,
well, Ken, I'll say to that if you come to one of those CEP courses with the right attitude, you will always learn something, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've never been to one in all of my experience and all my 20 plus years coaching. I've never been to a CEP where I didn't learn something. It just comes down to the mindset. I think that all of us as coaches, A, have to drop the ego a little bit, and B, there can sometimes be this attitude of, well, I know what I'm doing. And look, that may be true, but there's thousands of other coaches out there. And if you're not exploring more learning, you're not coaching. And I always say this quote that, like, good coaches know everything, great coaches know nothing, right?
Yes.
Like if you brought someone from 1999 through a time machine right now and put them on the ice with any age group and had them train those kids, you've got a problem. You've got a major problem, right? You have to consistently be evolving in that role. And if you're not yearning for more information, and again, from volunteer all the way up to if you want to do this professionally, you've got to be looking for that information. I mean, the things that drive me nuts, and Mike, I know it does too to you, is if a coach ever says to me, well, I don't know what drill to do. I don't, there are so many resources. You can go online and search drills for this. And as you said, Ken, you will get 40 billion of them back, right? Not to mention, I always like to bring up the USA Hockey Coach mobile app. I mean, it's in your hand. I mean, they'll do the whole plan for you. You do a whole practice for you on that thing if you really are struggling. But then other things too, like inter-coach communication. I don't see enough. This is my opinion. I don't see enough 8U coaches talking to 10U coaches and saying, what do you need them to be able to do when I hand them off to you? Right? That is something I have a 10U AA team right now. I am trying to talk to the 12U coaches to say, what skill sets do you find they need to be proficient at? Because if I don't provide them with that, and they can do a Michigan, or they can do a system great, but they can't do other things great, I have now failed those kids, right? And again, I'm not saying every coach knows about the Michigan. We all joke about that, but I think that that's part of the interpersonal communication. You should show up to these things, and again, I'm lecturing a little bit. I'm sorry, I just get passionate about this. You should show up to these courses excited to learn about something. Look, I'll confirm this. Yes, it is always at an inopportune time. We all have things to do. We all have places to be. But that's why you schedule these things ahead of time. Show up excited. Show up ready to learn. And you will be taught something, right? I'm going to say this one more time. I've never left a CEP course or an extended course where I didn't learn something or I didn't help somebody else learn something. So that's the mentality I think we need to create. Got to drop the ego. And again, I'm on a soapbox. I'm on soapbox today, guys. I'm passionate about this. But
it's a good one though. Drop the ego. That's so important.
Christy, this is why I need you, because you helped me take 4 minutes of talking down to one little thing. Ken, listen, I promised I would ask this question to our audience. I don't think that this is a question that any of us can answer, but a lot of people commented on girls hockey and how there's no checking past a certain age. And there was just a lot of questions about why that is. There was some concern that because we're not teaching it, sometimes young ladies don't have certain skill sets in the game for physicality. There's a lot of commenting that there's already physicality at that. So I would just love your perspective on checking in girls hockey and your thoughts on
that. The way the game is played in girls hockey, straight down the list, it stems from our international federation, that the rules that they play under. We haven't had it in girls hockey, but yet it's a really physical game at the top level of the sport. We need to be teaching competitive contact to girls. It helps prepare them for instability in difficult situations, how to be able to jostle and compete for pucks. That's still part of the game. Right. And as you get older, again, there's real combativeness to the sport. I mean, our women, they're very physical at the highest level, and I'm for teaching body contact, body checking all the way along. The same with our kids on the boys' side coming up, and we don't have the full check, blow somebody up at 10, but they need to be prepared for it when it does happen at 14. And then again, we go back to research. There's a lot of research done about any league that has checking in it. There's 3 times the number of injuries than versus a non-full check league. So we even thought, well, we should do it earlier because that'll help prepare the kids. And fortunately for us, we had Canada to look at, and they were actually introducing body checking at different ages in different provinces. And what they found out was introducing it earlier really didn't help prepare them any better for when full checking actually came online later on. So we're at 14U when we introduce it there, but from a girl's perspective, we need to teach that preparation. What goes into a body check. It's angling, it's closing, it's your skating skills that put you in position. It's good body position, good stick on puck, and then it's contact, just without the overt, I'm gonna ignore the puck and blow you up. So for me, it's all the precursors for checking. So we need to do it with our girls as just like we do with our boys, and help prepare them for.
And I've always understood that from the beginning of as the coaching education program evolved and the discussion around checking, and the old school coach saying, well, you have to have checking at mites, and I mean, yeah, but you're always teaching body contact, like body contact. I think that's you have to make sure you're defining body contact and body position and battling is checking. Right. It's just not like when I was when I was coaching, it's not what we've evolved out of is using body contact to change the momentum of a game and to your point, blow somebody up. Like, right. and I think there because not only is it safer, it's just the game's too fast. Like, so just as the game's evolved, body contact and body position. And I personally think the women's game is a great game to show youth players about how body contact works, because you don't see somebody doing a Scott Stevens at the blue line. Doesn't happen. So and I just think it's another one of those things where I think we've evolved, and I don't think we're going backwards. I think we're just getting smarter in the way we use body contact ultimately.
Yeah, and I encourage anyone who questions that, go to a women's hockey game. It's fast, it's furious, it's very physical.
Yes, it is.
Well, Ken, I think you did an expert job answering that question. I think for the people that asked that question, you're getting an answer here, right? That it's important to teach these skill sets and not ignore them in any level of hockey for any gender, for that matter, right? Competitive contact is a tactic in the game that I think we can all improve on, no matter where you're at. Mike, Christy, do you have any other final questions here before I close this out? This has been such a great episode.
I really appreciate Ken breaking down the building blocks of ADM and helping parents understand why it's such an important foundation, especially for the little ones. I know it may seem frustrating. Maybe it doesn't look like the hockey you grew up with, but there's a lot of research that's been done, and it's proven. And if you look at the highest levels, there's a huge payoff for your kid, not just with their skating skills, but fundamentally just building better skaters and better people. Really, it's a model that works. And there's an undertone of some communities wanting to get away from it, but a cautionary tale that Ken just shared with you about considering that. Stick with it. It'll pay off big time.
Yeah, I think for me, it's, being around rinks every day and hearing, like anybody, right? Any customer is going to complain about the governing body and who's telling them what to do and how to do it and when to do it. I would say that we are the most progressive youth sports program in the world. It does like what USA Hockey's done in research and development, and then showing us the path to our kids having a lot more fun and success. And if you want to get, like I've always said this about the contradicting pieces of USA Hockey with the customer, right? And the coach, the old school coach, or somebody that just doesn't get to go to coaching clinics and seminars and all this other continuing education stuff. It's like, well, just look at your kid. Lee, you said it earlier. Just look at your kid. Like, if you're watching a 6-year-old play a full ice game, there's one kid having fun on the ice. And if you watch a game where the kids are in a 10-by-10 space, they're all smiling, they're all laughing, they're all beating each other up out there. They're being little kids. And I think it's and not only is it more fun to me as a parent, I can never go back and watch. I can't watch an 8U full ice game. I can't even watch it. It's just not. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I'm like, well, this is not fun. watching the goalie lay on the ice. I mean, I watched an NHL in between period event, right? It's supposed to be the greatest thing in the world for the kids. And the one goalie never even knew that he was in the event. Like, he just sat in the other end and the puck never got down there. So what's that kid's experience like, right? He's in front of 18,000 fans and he literally, the camera didn't even go that end of the ice. And so I think it's like looking at how do we mimic a better environment for kids. All I will say is, Ken, we really appreciate, what you've done, in your profession, but personally going out and finding all these great little nuggets of research that you can bring and articulate it back to the people that don't have the time or the energy or the ability to find these things out. And I would encourage everyone to, if you really are interested in seeing your player develop, go to usahockey.com, go to Christie's articles and read about all that stuff that's going on. Make your own choice. But it's pretty clear when you get to look at the great people that we have. Like, we have NHL people on here all the time, and they all talk about the same thing: having fun, being competitive, having a reason to come to the rink every day. And I think what USA Hockey and Ken and his team have done is put that building block out there for people to use it. And the ones that don't, we all know who they are because we see the results, which is fine. That's, at the end of the day, it's a business, and people are going to take what they want out of it. But, take the fact that the research is done, use it, and embrace it. I don't know. And if you don't, then I'd love to see you debate the reason for it. Like, come up with a real answer. And if you come up with a real answer, I'm all for it. You tell me that cross ice, that full ice hockey is factually better, then I'll fight for you too. But you can't do it.
Well, Ken, we put you a little bit on the microscope today. You got some hard-hitting questions from the audience today, and you answered them all really well. And just in closing, I would say to the audience, I love that quote: "Be curious, not judgmental," with everything. But if you are judgmental and you want to discuss this, please feel free to comment. All right, there's a link accommodating this episode, accompanying this episode. Excuse me. If you look in the show notes, you can tap that and send us a message. You can email us at team@ourkidsplayhockey.com. Obviously, we'll have this on social media. But at the end of the day, and I'm going to kind of echo Mike and Christy here, and Ken, no matter what you think, let's have the discussion, because nothing's going to evolve and change if we don't have these great discussions about the game and where the game is going. I, for one, am a fan of the ADM. I'm also a fan of creativity, and I think those two things can exist in the same space. And you heard it from the man here today that is the way forward, right? It's not a mandate. It is a suggestion of the highest level. So, Ken, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. This was a great hour.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. All the episodes available wherever you listen. We'll see you next time, everybody. Skate on. We hope you enjoyed this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to like and subscribe right now if you found value wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Also, make sure to check out our children's book, When Hockey Stops, at whenhockeystops.com. It's a book that helps children deal with adversity in the game and in life. We're very proud of it. But thanks so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we'll see you on the next episode.